Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome in to the GSMC Football Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. It is your host back again to discuss everything and all things in the football world with you today, Brice. Today's show, we have another jam-packed show, football news. We're going to talk about more about the Deshaun Watson situation, my more in-depth thoughts on it. Going to also talk about Doug Peterson. As last episode, you know, he was not fired before that last episode went live. After that, he was, you know, basically let go the next day by Philadelphia in a mutual agreement for both parties, as Jeffrey Lurie said. So we're going to discuss that, Doug Peterson, his future in the league, what I'm hearing from that side of things. We're going to discuss and preview the divisional playoff games this week in AFC and NFC. And then we're also going to talk about Tua, as the Miami Herald had a very interesting report about Tua's teammates and how they feel about Tua going into the next year. Plus, we're going to also discuss the national championship that also happened in Alabama, winning once again and dominating college football. So as you can tell, we have a lot to talk about on the podcast today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for letting me be part of your day. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. So, I'm going to get into the Doug Peterson talk first. So, if you're not aware, Doug Peterson was let go by Philadelphia. You know, he met with Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, and they basically came to the decision that it was best to go their separate ways. Jeffrey Lurie was not confident in Doug Peterson's vision for the team in the future. Plus, there's been reports that were coming out that he and Howie Roseman, the GM of Philadelphia, did not get along. And then there was other reports that came out saying that at the end of the day, what it all came down to for Doug Peterson was he was not respected as much as he felt like he should have been respected within the organization. Because sometimes, you know, he's a Super Bowl winning coach. He won a Super Bowl for Philadelphia. And sometimes when you win a Super Bowl as a coach, you feel like you deserve more respect. You feel like you deserve more credit, more appreciation because you brought the city a championship, you brought the franchise a championship. And basically, Doug Peterson did not feel like he got that from Philadelphia within the Philadelphia organization. And so he kind of always was rubbed the wrong way. And I would almost look like what he did in Week 17 was more of just him being like, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do. And now he is out of that job. So now Philadelphia is added to the list of jobs that are not available. But it's something that, you know, when that happened, when he benched Jalen Hurts for Nate Sudfeld, it was an outrage. Everybody was shocked. They were just like, oh, his job has to be gone. You can't keep him after something like that. Clearly, also included with those reports with Greg Peterson leaving, they say it has now significantly increased their chances to keep Carson Wentz because his main issue basically was with Doug Peterson. And so now that you've gotten rid of that, I guess you can say problem in terms of this Carson Wentz situation, you now have a much better chance of retaining the guy that you paid a whole bunch of money to. Now, this has also opened up questions about Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts played well. He showed he could play. Will teams come calling about about Jalen Hurts? Will teams still call about Carson Wentz? It depends on the next head coach, whoever they end up hiring, what he thinks is best for the organization moving forward. So that's obviously a lot already to get out. But there's been some reports that as soon as he was let go, that since he has a relationship with Joe Douglas, who was formerly with Philadelphia, that he may go to the Jets. But now latest reports that I've heard has said that he actually may go ahead and take the year off, give himself a year away from the game, recharge. You know, and I always feel like stuff like this, Sometimes you need that. Sometimes after coming out of a very stressful situation that it seems like for him it was a situation where he didn't feel respected, a situation where he basically maybe was just like, whatever. You know, I think it may be good for him. Because you've started to see this a little bit more with coaches, where some coaches will get fired from a job or leave a job and then take a year, maybe 2 years off from the game to, like, you know, watch everything from a distance, see how the league is changing. Because sometimes when you're a coach, I'll just talk about this in the coach's perspective. When you're a coach, you're so focused on your team and rely on people to tell you what's going on outside of what you can learn from outside of your own team. Sometimes being able to take a step back and just look at the landscape of every NFL team can sometimes give you an idea of what maybe you should change when you come back. Maybe what did you do wrong? Maybe looking at, okay, what is other teams doing that's making them successful? Also, think about it. If I'm sure Doug Peterson will want to be a head coach when he returns to back to the league. If he does actually end up taking a year off, this will help him give a good look at, okay, look at every team situation. Which teams are bad? Which teams did he say, you know what, I could fix this. I could work with him. I could work with that quarterback. I could work with that guy. You know, gives you an idea to, really look at everything and not have to worry about something else. You can truly just keep up with everything. You never know. Certain certain television stations, radio stations, media stations are going to want to bring him onto a show, give his expert analysis. Also, this could even help him with the college game potentially. Not because he wants to be a college head coach or anything, but more because it gives him the ability to look at college players. Listen, as a head coach, you can't really watch the games, like college games, that much because you're having to focus on your own team, like I said. Now, coming back to the league, he can look at top prospects, top guys. I'm sure since he's a big NFL guy, he can get tape on players if he needs to. And then that way, when he comes back into the league, it's like, okay, I watched this year's college football. I've watched all of the NFL, and I have a better grasp on everything now. Plus, I'm more recharged because I was able to take a year off from the game and not exhaust myself. So that, to me, is something that is a positive of taking a year off if he actually does decide to take a year off. Philadelphia, what are they going to do? They're just going to start their head coaching search. Now, obviously, they started theirs a little bit later than some teams because they didn't do it as soon as the season ended. They made the decision after that. So, they're a little bit late, but not too late. It'll be interesting to see who they go with. Some people think with the Carson Wentz situation, do you need another offensive guy to work with Carson Wentz? Because you just think you need an offensive guy. Because we always think when you have a quarterback that's young, like Carson Wentz, who you've paid a lot of money to, people are going to say, we need to get him with a offensive-minded head coach ASAP. But sometimes you don't actually have to do that. You just need a leader of men. Listen, there's a coach in this league that nobody talks about. John Harbaugh. He's a special teams coach. So he's not an offensive specialist or a defensive specialist. He's a special team specialist. And he's been one of the longest tenured head coaches in all of the NFL with Baltimore. Because he's a leader of men and just a solid coach in all three levels. And he hires very good coaching staffs so that way they can still be consistent. And so I think you don't have to get an offensive guy to get along with Carson Wentz. What you need to do is you need to find a head coach who can control the locker room, a man, somebody that with respect, smart, works with his players. And then if you're worried about Carson Wentz, that's where the offensive coordinator comes in. Because we forget, we talk about the head coach. The offensive coordinator-quarterback relationship is just as, if not more important to me than the head coach-quarterback. Because think about it. If you bring in a defensive head coach, all of a sudden, so is that quarterback-head coach relationship not important? It's still important, but it's like he's a defensive guy. So he can only help the quarterback in so much. At that point, the offensive coordinator needs to have a good relationship, a healthy relationship where him and that quarterback's on the same page. And so they don't have to go offensive. I don't think but if they do go offensive, there's plenty of candidates, depending who's still available. Arthur Smith has been a big name Tennessee offensive coordinator. He's a finalist for the Jets job. He's a finalist for the Falcons job. He could be snatched up here soon. We know that Eric Bellamy is a guy who is now out there. Would he potentially consider? We've heard rumors that even Lincoln Riley might be somebody the Eagles may target. A guy who has an innovative offense at Oklahoma, now maybe trying to bring that to the NFL, put that with Carson Wentz and see how he does in that offense. So it's a very interesting situation. If you're Philadelphia, you have plenty of options. There's no, in people's mind, can't miss prospect or candidate out of all the head coaches this year. But there are really good coaching candidates out there that I think can all do a pretty good job if they get with the right team, because we always got to understand when you're looking for a coach, sometimes coaches just don't work with certain teams because it just wasn't the right fit. And Eagles need to make sure it's the right fit. Now, a good thing for the Eagles is that usually when they have had coaches, outside of maybe if you want to say Chip Kelly, they've pretty much had success. Andy Reid, long tenured head coach. Chip Kelly was an experimental guy. They experimented with him because they saw his college success. Didn't work out, but it's okay. Then Doug Peterson got you a Super Bowl. So they've pretty much not missed on a lot of head coaches. So they've done a pretty decent job with that, especially in the city of Philadelphia that some people consider a very hard city to play in. So it'll be interesting to see what the Eagles' decision and what they decide to do moving forward going into the offseason and who they actually decide to hire as the new head coach. But I'm going to transition into this before we get out of this segment. I want to just give some more thoughts on the Deshaun Watson situation, what's happening in Deshaun Watson. Last episode, I discussed how he wanted to trade. One team that he was open to was the Miami Dolphins. But one thing I also want to sit here and say is, you've heard more people come out. You've heard former wide receiver, basically outside of DeAndre Hopkins, you could say is the greatest wide receiver that played the Houston Texans uniform, Andre Johnson, come out and say, listen, I'm going to keep it real. This organization isn't great. I mean, listen, this is a guy who the Houston looks at as like a legendary wide receiver. He was one of their first over players. He was one of the good ones. Never was anybody that you would say is a Hall of Fame potentially, but he was a really good wide receiver while he was in the league. And he said, yeah, Houston's not it. He says, if I'm Deshaun Watson, I stand my ground and I try to get out of there because they're not good to players. And so, Deshaun has a very interesting decision to make. Right now, last time we heard, he was on vacation and he had not officially demanded or told the team he wants to trade. I think to me, clearly there's something wrong within the organization. Because there's the fact that there's so many players going out of their way, former Houston players, former players in general, going out of their way to tell Deshaun public, and they're not, I don't know if they're talking to Deshaun, privately. I'm sure some of them have reached out to him. But publicly, you're hearing so many players say, I think he needs to leave Houston. Houston's not a good, Houston doesn't care about you. Houston isn't this. Houston isn't that. Clearly, if you're Houston, more than just the Deshaun Watson thing, this is a really bad look for your franchise. That you have so many people around the league just questioning your organization, your organizational culture, your organizational stamp, your standing. Former players that you considered all-time Texans in the short franchise history that y'all have had coming out saying, I agree with him. They're nearly not that great. That must really be an issue within your organization because you're having so much negative attention come your way. I still remember when they traded DeAndre Hopkins, how players came out and how people came out and said, well, I just, if I'm Deshaun Watson, I might need to look into moving. But at the end of the day, Houston to me messed up again where they told Deshaun, we want you to give us some input in what we should do next with the team, and then turn around and not even give him that same opportunity to give input like they said they would give him. Now, to me, I feel like that's not on Deshaun, that's on Houston. Houston messed up in that situation. That's why they put themselves in this situation. If you're Houston, this is the thing I would say. You don't have any first or second round draft picks this year. You're over the cap, and the cap is going down. So it's going to be very hard for you to make any changes to your team. You have to seriously consider starting over and trading Deshaun Watson. I truly feel like you have to, because at least with him, you get a fresh start. You get a chance to maybe change the organizational culture, or the vision of, or the view of the organization around the league. You get some cap space back so you can make some changes. I'm sure you get a decent, good draft haul for him. Maybe you can get 2 first-round picks. Maybe, this year, next year, 2 this year in a second. Get some draft picks back, and then go from there. I think if you're Houston, it's something you have to consider. You can't rule it out. So it'll be interesting to see the decisions that Houston makes when that decision comes with Deshaun Watson. But we're going to clearly keep an eye on this and see if Deshaun actually even gets to a point where he even demands a trade. So it's something we're going to definitely keep on here. But That's all the time we have for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to start reviewing the divisional games this coming weekend for the NFL playoffs. We're going to start with the AFC side of things, so stay tuned right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we discussed Doug Peterson being let go as Philadelphia Eagles head coach. Now is a free man, can go anywhere he wants. He may not go anywhere. He may take a year off, as some people have started to speculate. Maybe he takes a job. People have connected him to the Jets job because of his connection with Douglas. Maybe there's another job potentially he could go to. We'll have to see. We'll have to see everything that happens. Also, the Eagles have to go look for a new head coach. Heard maybe a Lincoln Riley potentially is someone in that card. So we'll see if maybe they go to the college ranks to pair with Carson Wentz. Or maybe even Jalen Hurts, because he has a relationship with Jalen Hurts. He just played with Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma. Maybe it's a Jalen Hurts move. We don't know. But I also gave my thoughts on the Deshaun Watson situation in terms of just how Houston really put themselves in a bad position, and what they shouldn't even just be worried about is what's happening with Deshaun. But just how so many people have came out and talked negatively and badly about their organization. Clearly, Houston's organization is not viewed very well in this league. And they have to change that. Because that alone can make players not want to commit and play for you because of that. And that's something you don't want lingering over your franchise. But now, we're going to get into the AFC Divisional playoff games. Listen, I don't know why I keep wanting to say wild card. I know Super Wild Card weekend was last weekend, but I don't know. Is it easier to roll off the tongue? I have no idea. Whatever. But yes, the AFC Divisional games too this week. We have Browns and Kansas City, and we also have Baltimore and Buffalo. So we're going to go ahead and get right into them, give you my predictions on those games and how I think the games are going to play out. And we're going to start with Baltimore and Buffalo as they're the last game on Saturday. So coming into this game, you have two quarterbacks, two from the same draft class, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Two guys who, it's kind of funny. Now, yes, Josh Allen's the better thrower, and Lamar Jackson's the better runner, but Lamar Jackson can throw a good ball. Still developing, still getting better. And Josh Allen, he's not a bad runner. He's a big guy who can run pretty fast. Can take some to the house if you give him enough room. And so it's two quarterbacks who basically are dynamic in their own way facing off this week. Now, if you look at the matchup, and let me talk about Buffalo first. If you watched and you analyzed that game with the Colts, one thing the Colts have is they have a really good roster. What people think they need to be taken over the top is the quarterback. You could basically say Buffalo and Indianapolis' roster, if we're discluding quarterbacks, their rosters are not that far apart. The difference in that game between the Colts and the Bills was Josh Allen, because the quarterback is a level above Phillip Rivers at this point. And so now you're going into a game. I feel like Baltimore has the better defense in this game. I think they have better defensive personnel than Buffalo does. The big matchup for them is going to be Marcus Peters or Humphrey, whoever they decide to put on him, against Stephon Diggs. Then, if you look at Buffalo's defense, now, Buffalo's defense isn't what they were last year, where they were a top 5 defense. They're still a good defense, but they're not as good. And you could see the Colts could run the ball on them a little bit. They were able to get some plays in the secondary. Buffalo was susceptible to some big plays. And so I think coming into this game for Baltimore, you want to kind of establish, you want to kind of do what you did last week against Tennessee. You know, as a team, your strength is running the football. So you're going to run the football against Buffalo. You know, make it a time of possession game. Keep Josh Allen off the field. That's the first thing you're going to do. So when you do that, and you make the game shorter, it gives Josh Allen less possessions, then you capitalize. That's why I think you're starting to maybe hear people say this game could go more Baltimore, even though Buffalo is the favorite, because if you think about it, Lamar Jackson can make very dynamic plays, and they can make a lot of things happen. And here's the thing, too. The Bills are only 2.5-point favorites going into this game. And like I said, I really think this game could go either way. I think the thing that concerns me a little bit about Buffalo as well is they seem to be a little bit dependent on Josh Allen. And sometimes that's a very dangerous game to play in the playoffs because basically he has to be good, or else can they, do enough on the ground game? Can they make enough stops or get enough turnovers defensively? Where if Josh Allen didn't have a great game, they would still be very much in position to winning. One thing about Baltimore I can say is, even though, yes, Lamar Jackson is a very dynamic guy, I don't feel like they're Lamar Jackson dependent. I don't feel like they have to have Lamar Jackson have a huge game for them to win, even though if he has a huge game, that clearly increases their chances. Because they have a good defense who could keep them in the game. They have, yes, Lamar Jackson adds to that running game, but they have two very good running backs in Kate and Dobbins and Gus Edwards. And so if you're talking about from a passing perspective, Lamar Jackson doesn't necessarily have to do the most to be able to get them to a victory. Like I said, he just got his first playoff win. Right now, out of that draft class, he has the most wins out of all the quarterbacks. That draft class also included Sam Darnold and Josh Rosen as well, and Baker Mayfield. And so, it's going to be interesting, for me to see what happens with these guys. Really, it really is, because this game, to me, could go either way. Both teams, are very well coached. Sean McDermott, I think, is one of the best coaches we don't talk about in the league. He's one of the best second-half adjustment coaches that we have in the game. But, Harbaugh, he's been in the game a long time. He's been a very long tenured head coach. He has consistent success year after year for a reason. So to me, this game could go either way. I think right now, I'm not going to, this isn't going to be my upset pick. So I'm going to go with Buffalo. I'm going to go with Buffalo this week. I think they're going to squeak out another close victory. I don't think we're going to get a 13-20 game we saw with Baltimore last week. I think we're going to get a little bit more of a high-scoring game a little bit. But I think Josh Allen's going to make enough plays. And I think that's what's going to get them over the top to win. So I'm going with Buffalo. If I had to give you a score, I go 28-24. That would be my score for that game. So I think that Buffalo is going to get enough offensively from Josh Allen. They're going to get some big plays. Because Baltimore's defense is very good, but also is susceptible. We've seen times where they have let up some big plays, so it's not like this Baltimore defense, isn't like they'll break sometimes. So I think Buffalo, that's one thing they've been able to do a lot all of this year is just get big plays in key moments. And so I think they're going to get that in that game and pick up a victory and make it to the AFC Championship game. And now we're going to transition into the other AFC game. The Kansas City Chiefs, the number 1 seed, against the Cleveland Browns, upset Kings over the Pittsburgh Steelers last week. Now, if you were aware, Pittsburgh talked a lot of smack about Cleveland, got destroyed by Cleveland. Then, after the game, Chase Claypool came out and said, well, you know what? It's all good because the Browns are about to get clapped next weekend by the Chiefs. And you know what? When I heard that, I was like, you know something, man? Something tells me that's going to motivate the Browns. Because literally this entire week, people are telling them, listen, y'all, it was great that y'all upset Pittsburgh, but Big Ben looks old. You know what I'm saying? They can't run the football. You just had a good game plan. You won the game. You're not doing that against Kansas City. And something is just making me a little bit nervous about this game for Kansas City. They haven't played in a good minute. About 2 weeks. 2 weeks they really haven't played. Listen, we always say this with teams who have bye weeks. Are they going to get too much rest? Are they going to be rusty because they've sat, on the sidelines for too long? And the Browns are hot right now, coming in off a big-time win against Pittsburgh, winning their first playoff game since 1997. Is this a game where they're going to be too, excited, too, whoa, like, oh, snap? I think that's going to be the question here. And so for me, I think overall, the Browns, okay, here's the issue with the Browns. I think everybody knows their secondary is their weakest part of the team. They don't have a very good secondary. Plus, they're injured on the back end as well. Now, we'll see if they can get some guys back, like a Denzel Ward this week, and etc. We'll see if they can get some guys back this week. If they can, that will definitely help to have all hands on deck. But that's what we've known as the weakness of Cleveland, is their secondary. But what is their strength? Running the football and getting after the passer. That formula is a formula that you want against a team like Kansas City. Because first, you run the ball to win. Again, win time of possession. Keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. Then you could get after Patrick Mahomes with that front four with Myles Garrett leading the way. But the question is Cleveland's secondary going to be able to hold up against these wide receivers? That's going to be the key question here. Because if they can't hold up, then it's not going to be good enough for Cleveland. Because I don't think it's at a point where the Browns and Baker can I don't think you can say, hey, Baker, we need you to beat Patrick Mahomes in a throw out and win us the game. I don't think you can say, Baker, win the game by just outplaying Patrick Mahomes. Now, listen, the crazier things have happened in the NFL. So it's not like, oh, it will never, ever, ever, ever happen. But you just don't think, oh, Browns are going to outthrow Kansas City and win the game. Because they don't have to. Because one thing I was really impressed with last week with Cleveland is how, even with Kevin Stefanski, they had a game plan. They stuck to the game plan. I said when I was giving my prediction for that game, the Browns know who they are. Just do what you know what to do. You don't need Kevin Stefanski to be there to do that. It's not like this is game 3 and you're still maybe trying to figure out the team. It's the playoffs. You know what you are. You know what got you here. Just stick to that and you'll be fine. And they did last week, including all those turnovers. Now, if they already get those kind of turnovers against Kansas City's in trouble this week for sure. But if you can't run the football, because I think Kansas City, you can run on this team and keep Patrick Mahomes off the field. But in terms of Patrick Mahomes, remember, we know how great of a quarterback he is. We know he can literally, it's like they want to pass the ball. So getting a lead isn't necessarily going to make you feel any better about it because you know how dynamic that passing game is. And so if I had to make a prediction in this game, I'm going to take Kansas City, but it's not a very confident Kansas City. Now, it's crazy. Now, the bettors, 10-point dogs. They think Kansas City is going to roll Cleveland. Me, I just think this game's going to be a little closer than people expect. So I'm going to take Kansas City, but I'm expecting to be close. I feel like this could be a bit of a more high-scoring game. Because like I said, Cleveland's secondary is not that good, so they're going to have to score some points. So I may go 31-28 here, Kansas City. They're going to make it to the AFC Championship game, but Cleveland's going to give them a really good fight, and they've had an amazing season, up to this point. So that's my prediction for that game. And that's all the time we have for this segment. So coming up next, we're going to get into the NFC divisional games, so stay tuned right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we broke down the AFC Divisional wildcard games. I gave my predictions and scores for those games and what I think goes into who determines and what to watch out for in those games as well. Before we get into the NFC Divisional games, I would just like to let you guys know, if you'd like to keep up with GSMC Football on Twitter, please follow us at GSMC_football. That's GSMC_football. Keep up with us, interact, talk about all things happening in college and professional football, highlights, scores, news, updates, everything of that sort. Definitely. So if you want to definitely interact and support us on social media, on Twitter, follow us at GSMC_football. So now let's get into the NFC side of divisional games. We'll start with the Saturday game, the first game actually that kicks off divisional weekend. The LA Rams and the Green Bay Packers. So this game right here, to me, is going to be a very intriguing game because, listen, the Rams, if you actually look at how the Rams are constructed, they are constructed to beat every team in the league because they can get an interior pass rusher, Aaron Donald, which every quarterback hates, and they have a lockdown corner they can put on your best wide receiver. So every game, realistically, they should have a chance to beat you just because of the way they're constructed. They can get after the passer, cover your best weapon. The key for them was on the offensive side in Jared Goff, because we know Sean McVay is an offensive genius. They have 3 running backs who they can go to. Right now, it's Cam Akers with a hot hand. Very good wide receivers. Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. Those guys. And, they can beat a team like Green Bay. Like, remember, Green Bay's team from last year probably would not beat this year's Rams team. But the thing that is going against the Rams is that, first, Aaron Donald is playing with a rib injury, so we don't know how that's going to affect him. Obviously, the ribs in his midsection, it hurts to breathe when you have rib injuries. We don't know how that's going to affect him in his game. Can he still be dominant? As far as our indications, Sean McVay said he's not going to practice this week. He's going to let him rest. Expectation is, it sounds like at the moment we are expecting Aaron Donald to play in this game. So let's just say Aaron Donald plays. Also, Jared Goff, still nursing the thumb injury. He's probably going to get most of the week off as well to rest the thumb. These two players will not be 100% going into the game. Now, we saw last week, clearly with Goff being hurt, he was not able to be as effective because of that. We clearly saw that minutes when he came into the game. And so the Rams have to use the same formula maybe this week as last week to be in Green Bay. Run the ball, make it a time of possession game, and play really good defense. Now, on Green Bay's side of it, you have them coming off a bye. Aaron Rodgers, I think at this point, is expected to be everybody's MVP. Played really good football. In the second year of the system, they've played even better. They have, still got Aaron Jones, still Williams. Maybe you may see A.J. Dillon sighting. You still got Devontae Adams, Valdez-Scantling, guys like that. You have plenty of guys on this team that can play. And so the biggest thing about last year's team that we think isn't the same thing as this year's team is last year's team was not physical. It was a finesse football team. This year, we had questions after some games early in the season. Is this the same Green Bay team? Is this team still a fraudulent team? Or they can play in a lot of track meet games, finesse games, and they'll win those games. But if you have a hit them in the mouth, smack them in the mouth football team, they can't compete. They've been able to slowly kind of get that narrative, quieted by the way they ended the season. So now the question is, going against the Rams, who can play finesse or physical to me, how will the Packers do against that? The key to the game clearly is if they can get pressure on Aaron Rodgers, that's going to be big. Because here's the thing. If Jalen Ramsey is able to really keep Devontae Adams under, quiet for the most of the game, there's going to be on the other Green Bay receivers. And what's one thing also that's been a question about Green Bay's offense? Are they able to get enough from the other guys outside of Devontae Adams because Rodgers goes to Devontae Adams so much? That's going to be the question. And listen, this game to me, I feel like if you're the Rams, you want this to be a lower scoring game, maybe like a 21-24 kind of game. You want this to be a little lower scoring. If you're Green Bay, you want this to be a higher scoring game because with Goff's injury, you probably don't believe he can score enough, especially through the air, to really, be able to put enough points up on the board to compete. So I'm sure both teams want to play the game differently. They want it to be different types of games. But like I said to start, I think the Rams are built to beat a team like Green Bay. Because if you look at the matchups between the last 2 weeks, you got Russell Wilson, a very mobile guy, really good thrower of the football, dynamic receiver on the outside. And they were able to handle that. This week, mobile quarterback, very dynamic receiver on the outside. Now, you can clearly make the argument that Green Bay's offensive line is much better than Seattle's. That would be the only difference. But if Green Bay and Aaron Donald is able to come back and create pressure on Aaron Rodgers, I think they have a really good chance to upset Green Bay. And then if the Rams can get a semblance or what they were able to get close to what they were able to get last week in the running game, from a Cam Akers especially, that's going to really open it up. Because listen, it's been a week. I expect Goff to be a little bit healthier, but I'm not saying I'm expecting him to be 100%. But I expect him to be a little bit like, okay, I've had a week to kind of, get treatment, get my thumb ready to go. It's not like I just had it, took week 17 off because of it. Now I'm going into the divisional game into the wild card game like he did last week after not even starting. And now he's in the divisional game. It's been now about 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks since he's had the surgery. Should be at a slightly better place than he was earlier. Now, again, he'll probably never be healthy throughout the entire postseason with that thumb. But if he could get it close enough where he feels like he could be himself and be the good Jared Goff, the Rams have a great chance to win this game. And honestly, this is going to be my upset pick of the week. I'm going to go with the Rams here to upset Green Bay. I think it's going to be a close game. And I think both teams are going to put it, obviously they're going to put all in the line. But I think the Rams, I just think they're going to be able to slow down the offense of Green Bay enough. And with Sean McVay, I have a lot of trust in his coaching. And figuring out, okay, how can we attack Green Bay's defense and still be able to score points? You know what I'm saying? Because he's a guy who will come up with different game plans for specific teams week after week on how to attack them. And I think he's going to do it again here. And I think they're going to be able to win this game and be able to upset the Green Bay Packers and this will be the second year the Green Bay gets eliminated after getting a bye. But it's not because I don't think it's because they're the same team as last year or anything of that nature. I just think this is a very tough matchup for Green Bay, and I just feel more confident, like I said, in Sean McVay to be able to figure it out at the end of the day and help them win. And now switching over to the other game of the NFC, we have Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the New Orleans Saints. Now, let me say this. Now, yes, I am a Falcons fan, and so it hurts me to say this, but I'd rather have New Orleans make it to the NFC Championship game than Tom Brady. Because even as a Falcons fan, even through everything that has happened, I don't sit here and hate the Saints. I don't. I don't. But I don't like Tom Brady. Not because he's, I don't. It's not like I don't think he's a good player or anything of that sort. I know he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. That's not it. I just don't like him. I just don't want him to win anymore. And so, I have my rooting in this game. But going into the breakdown of it, the Saints have dominated Tampa Bay twice this year. Now, this is the third time. Now, the last time a team beat a team 3 times in a year was the Saints against Carolina, where they swept Carolina 3 times in the year. And so, this is going to be their next chance to do it against Tampa. You would think a guy like Tom Brady wouldn't lose to the same team 3 times, especially in the same year. And the thing about those 2 games is that they really weren't competitive. But I think this game is expected to be competitive. Because I think everybody realizes Bruce Arians has now allowed Tom Brady to run the kind of offense he wants to run, while incorporating some of Bruce Arians' elements into the offense with the deep play. And that's why their offense has been much more efficient and better. They have made more of a commitment to the running game as well. And I think that's really helped Tom out. The Saints, now, you could also sit here and say the Saints are just not a good matchup. Because the key to this game is going to be Tampa Bay's offensive line. In both of those matchups, they were overwhelmed by the Saints. And we have seen when the offensive line struggles, that's when Tampa Bay's offense looks their worst. And Brady, remember, he's not a spring chicken. He doesn't like getting hit. So I'm sure the Saints know if we get after Tom, we have a great chance to win this game. Now, last week, against a good Bears defense, the Saints only scored 21 points. So it's not like they offensively, lighted it up. So it's going to be key for them this week to play better offensively. Like I said, the second week back with Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and Drew Brees in what everybody expects to be Drew Brees' final run as a New Orleans Saint. And, I think this game's going to come down to, at the end of the day, Drew Brees against the Tampa Bay secondary. Because that is the one part of the team that we've always known is susceptible. You really can't run on Tampa Bay. So I'm not expecting a big day for Alvin Kamara on the ground. They're going to have to make their impact in the secondary matchup against the linebackers, against safeties. Because you usually can't run on a team like Tampa Bay. They're usually pretty good in that perspective. Now, also, I would also say this is probably a good time for Michael Thomas to have a Michael Thomas kind of game. Because I think he has the mismatch against any corner out there. And so I also think this will be a good game for him to really have one of those big games. Now, I don't expect this to be a blowout. I actually expect this to be a much more competitive game this time around. I expect this to be a much more competitive game. So it'll be interesting to see if you're Tampa Bay, you may want this to be a higher scoring game because you may feel like with Tom and the weapons versus Drew and his weapons, your offense is built to score more points than the Saints. But if you're the Saints, you've been so successful of limiting that offense, you probably want to make sure, hey, if we can do what we've done to their offense the last 2 times we've played them, we have a great chance to win. Because we feel like with Sean Payton calling plays and with our offensive staff and offensive weaponry, we should still be able to get enough points against that Tampa Bay defense than against our defense, because the Saints defense is one of the best defenses in all of the NFL. Like, let's be honest, they're really, they can get after you, they can cover, great linebacker play. They really have a lot of good players. on that defense, and that's why they've had so many games where they've been able to shut down offenses. So I'm going to take the Saints in this game. I think they're going to beat, Tampa Bay, but I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think this is going to be a blowout again, because that would be shocking for them to get blown out 3 times in one season by the same team. But I think the Saints are going to pick up the victory and make it to the NFC Championship game and meet the Rams there. A rematch of the NFC Championship game for 2 years ago. So that's going to be a very interesting memory or a trip down memory lane for both of those teams. Well, that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the college football championship game between Alabama and Ohio State. And we're also going to get into some Tua talk, so stay tuned right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we did my NFC predictions of the NFC Divisional round that will be coming up this weekend. Very exciting slate of playoff games on both sides. Look very, very much forward to playoff weekend. So definitely going to stay tuned in for that. But now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the other big game that happened from the last week, or the last day of that last week, if you want to consider it the entire football weekend. The college football playoff national championship game, and it was a rout by the Tide, blowing out Ohio State. Alabama winning their sixth, I believe it's their 6th championship since 2008, I believe, and Nick Saban's 7th championship overall. And it's just, it's crazy. It really is. Winning this game 52-24. Also, if you're looking for an update on Alabama offensive coordinator, it looks like Bill O'Brien's going to become the offensive coordinator of Alabama. And honestly, I think that just adds on to why Alabama's been so great. They hire NFL head coaches, coaching a pro-style system, and now these guys are in here with all this talent, able to get that NFL teaching. And honestly, we have to talk about the dominance of Alabama as a football program, as this is the greatest run ever in college football history for any team. There's no run greater. There's literally none. There just isn't. There's not a debate there. Because they've been so good. It's so dominant for so long. It feels like every year Alabama can win a national championship. Legitimately. And so that's what makes them such a great a great university in terms of their football team, because they're always able to win. They always are able to reload. They're about to lose Mac Jones, Najee Harris, Weddle, and their Heisman Trophy winner, Smith, to the draft. A couple of offensive linemen. And they're still going to be favorite to probably win the SEC next year and make it back to the national championship game. Now, they have a very young stud in Brice Young coming in here. People have already put him in the Heisman talk. And he's never even played a snap at Alabama, real meaningful snaps. Because that's just Alabama. They reload. They're going to have enough talent to replace the talent they have and still just be good enough or just as elite of talent. And so, for me, I just look at them, with Waddle and Smith and everybody. Nick Saban, I think, has also submitted himself as the greatest head coach in college football history. I think a lot of people already knew that before this game. He's just adding to his overall resume. And, it's funny because people have been talking about how Nick Saban has been looking for his predecessor. He doesn't want to leave Alabama without having a predecessor. People said that was going to be Steve Sarkisian until he took the Texas job. Now with Bill O'Brien, would Bill O'Brien potentially want to maybe be the face of Alabama one day? We don't know. Because Nick Saban cares about Alabama. He cares about, the team. He cares about the program. He doesn't want to leave them in a bad shape where he's just going to retire all of a sudden and they're like, oh, man, we got to find somebody. Oh, we got to scramble to find someone to replace Nick. But regardless of whenever Nick leaves, the program's going to be in great shape. They're probably going to still have a bunch of 5-star recruits on the roster. If you can coach and coach well, you can get the most out of this group. And that's what has contributed to their success year after year. Like Alabama's one of the few teams that can lose all the talent they lose, and you're confident they'll be good next year. But not just good, they're playing in the toughest conference in what people consider the toughest conference in all of college football, in the SEC. See, Ohio State, they're about to lose Justin Fields, to the draft. But the Big Ten is not looked at as a very strong conference. So even if they don't necessarily get that much better at that, or they don't, find a guy who's just as adequate as Justin Fields, Ohio State's still going to be the favorite. Clemson, they're about to lose Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and a couple other guys, but they're still going to be the favorites in the ACC because we don't look at anybody in the ACC at their level or ready to take over the ACC as the competitive. The SEC, it's Alabama, but at the same time, Georgia's usually their second best program every year. Maybe Florida. This year it was Florida. But they're still not able to beat a team like Alabama. And, that's all just part with what Nick Saban has done. And so, winning a sixth national championship there at Alabama, because think about it. Before that, Alabama was never known. They were known as a good college program, but they were never known as a great college program. And then Nick Saban gets there. Now they're known as one of the greatest college programs in all of college football. They're a little bit of, people think they're a little bit quote unquote boring because they're Alabama. Alabama doesn't have flash to it, but they win and they're consistent. And so, overall, I just look at it and just, people are critical of Nick Saban sometimes, but, we have to really appreciate what we have seen. We have to really appreciate what he has done. He has just became a larger-than-life figure in the state of Alabama, not just in Tuscaloosa. And, he has done just such a great job there for as long as he has. They still have the number one recruiting class in the country this year coming in as well. So clearly they're just so good. That's why if there's one team that wasn't going to be affected by the COVID stuff, it was Alabama. Because the way they're coached, the way they preparation, it don't matter if COVID happened, anything, they're going to be always ready to go. Because Nick Saban is a guy who always has his guys ready. And you saw it this year. So I just want to congratulate Alabama on a great season and now are your 2020 national champions. But now I have to get back into some Tua talk. Tua Tagovailoa. Talked about him last show. I talked about how, Deshaun Watson was interested in coming to Miami. And I talked about how I think Tua and Baker are the same kind of guy. Similar skill set. Both have the same criticisms, don't have something special about them, but accurate. Not the most athletic guys in the world, but, can move. And now there was a report coming from the Miami beat writers from the Miami Dolphins, saying that anonymous players have came out and said they don't think Tua is going to be good enough to get them where they want to go. And this has raised a lot of debate, even again, about should Miami draft a quarterback? Should Miami go get a quarterback? You know what I'm saying? No one's saying that Tua shouldn't have a chance to start. But what they're saying is that based off the 10 games, can you say that you feel like he can be that guy? Now, I am a person who sits here and says, and I said this last time, I think Tua deserves this second year to prove himself because he's played 10 games in the league with no offseason. None. And we can get into logistics. Chan Gailey wasn't the best offensive coordinator for him. Didn't fit his skill set. Miami had one of the worst running games in the league. They had injuries at wide receiver. It all in their offensive line was a work in progress. So we can say all that and say. Now, they still went 10-6. And yes, Ryan Fitzpatrick would have gave them a better chance. But to me, I just think you can't, those circumstances, you can't sit here and tell me you can just tell Tua's not going to be good. I've said this before. You can get I always like to say, a cleaner evaluation of a guy if you put talent around him and give him a good offensive coach and he still struggles. That's how you can sit here and say, okay, he's not that good. Now, I do agree. Miami, I feel like, is not going to draft a quarterback. I've stated this fact. I feel like they're going to take wide receiver Devontae Smith at this moment in time unless something changes this offseason. And I think they're going to address the quarterback situation through free agency. And so I think that Tua, to me, deserves another chance. And I think Tua, to me, is a guy who's very coachable, works hard, accurate, a guy who you can work with. I'm sure Tua knows what he needs to work on. Whoever they hire as a new offensive coordinator will probably talk to Tua and talk about, this is what we want to do, this is how we want to do it, this is what I need you to improve so we can do it. And Tua's going to try to work on it and do it. Because remember, at this time last year, Tua was just trying to prove to people he was healthy. He was trying to rehab. He wasn't even able to really work on his, I'm not saying he didn't work on his game, but you got to think about it. His focus was on rehabbing and getting himself back to playing. So it wasn't even like he was sitting here like every other NFL prospect and able to like work on their game throughout because they were healthy. They were just trying to work on their game and get prepared for the draft. He was getting prepared for the draft, but he was also rehabbing. So I feel like you have to take that under account. I feel like, listen, if they upgrade the weaponry around Tua and the offensive line, and like I said, Tua struggles, then you have a reason to say, okay, Tua's not the guy. But you can't sit here and say after 10 games, with everything I just said, and tell me, yeah, I know he's not. Because trust me, that's the reason why I made the Baker comparison. When you see organizational, structurally, and coaching-wise changes, you got all these weapons around him, Baker has played better. Baker has played well. Baker now looks like, okay, he can be the guy. Listen, and you can still sit here and say, yeah, there's still things Baker struggles with. Okay, I got you. He's not perfect. No quarterback is. But if you're able to win and make it to the playoffs and do something with Baker, why can't you do it with Tua too? If you give him that exact, you can't tell me if you put Tua in that exact situation with Kevin Stefanski and everything, he can't be good. To me, I just feel like you can't say that. And I think that's why, when I've been reading a lot of people for the Miami beat writers, a lot of the beat writers in Miami have even kind of echoed what I've said. They're not necessarily worried about Tua like a lot of people are. They're just like, listen, he needs to work on things that rookie young players need to work on and, get a second year under his belt, get an actual off season, prove the talent around him, get a coordinator that fits his strengths, and then I think Tua will be better. Because, that's what I'm saying. You can't, why not give him that opportunity? Why are you going to get all that and then bring someone else in? And then if the other guy's successful, then say Tua wasn't the guy. Well, it's not like you gave him the same thing. So I think if I'm Miami, it obviously is disheartening to hear, teammates come out and say this. But I think Tua's going to take this as motivation and work hard to prove himself to his coaches, prove himself to his team, and prove himself to the fan base. Because that's the kind of guy Tua comes off to me as. And I think Tua will be fine. I'm a Tua believer. Okay? I believe he could be better. I truly think he can be better. You just got to give him a chance. It's like saying we're going to put, and that's why I also felt like with the Sam Darnold thing, it was kind of the same. You know, he has one of the worstest coaching staffs and not really the best offense, and yet we're trying to sit here and say he's not that good. Like, to me, it's just like, can we actually put a better team around him first and then make that judgment? But that's just what I want to say about that. But that's all the time we have here on the podcast. Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you for letting me be part of your day once again. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. This is your host, Brice, signing out, saying have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.